This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 4, entitled "To the Gender Politicians, Genocidal Criminals." Description: a flyer explaining to the gender politicians why they are indirectly wiping out the American population by having allowed the fluffy feminists to take over the divorce courts. Now the flyer itself. To the gender politicians, genocidal criminals. You gender politicians are seen by the masculists and MGTOW, men going their own way, movements as genocidal criminals because you allowed the fluffy feminists to take over the divorce courts, and as a consequence the US population will be wiped out within a century. The masculists and MGTOWs are part of the men's lib movement. A fluffy is a masculist label for a traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off a man's money. The primary political goal of the masculists is to wipe out fluffies by refusing to have relationships with them, preferring to have relationships with FIPS, a masculist label for a financially independent person, which is the kind of woman masculists demand that all women become, or they just won't get a man. A fluffy feminist has had her feminist consciousness raised, but not her masculist consciousness, so by default still has traditional expectations of men, that is, seeing them as exploitable checkbooks for women to man-enslave. You gender politicians changed the divorce laws so that now, typically, a divorcing father will, and then there's quite a list, bullet, lose his kids with 90% probability, bullet, lose his house to his ex-wife so she can raise her kids in it, bullet, be forced to pay child support to kids he will barely see, maybe 2 visits a month, bullet, if his ex-wife's a fluffy, he'll be forced to pay her alimony with no legal obligation on her part to get a decent job and become a FIP. As a result, tens of millions of American divorce fathers have been financially massacred. Young men under 35 in the US have seen what happened to their fathers and have now chosen, 70% of them, not to marry and not to have kids. This marriage strike will crash the birth rate and crash the population. If this continues, the US population will be wiped out in a mere century. Indirectly, you gender politicians are responsible for this. You are accused of being genocidal criminals, because indirectly you are wiping out the US population. You must make the gender laws men fair by, for example, bulleted form, bullet, making joint child custody in a divorce the default option. Bullet, allowing the owner or owners of the house before the divorce to keep it. Bullet, pushing the idea that a divorced couple buy a cheap nearby apartment that is shared by them both on an alternate basis, swapping weekly, with one parent in the house with the kids and the other in the apartment. The following week they swap places. Bullet, putting moral pressure on women to be FIPS. Bullet, putting moral pressure on female university students to study career-competent majors so that they can become FIPS as adults. Bullet, legislate a paternity rejection right, equivalent to women's maternity rejection right, also known as aka abortion right, that allows a man to reject fatherhood. If the woman continues the pregnancy, the child becomes her full financial responsibility. The lack of a para is a blatant sexual discrimination against men. Bullet, set up a panel of experts to recommend gender-fair laws for both sexes. If you don't do the above, men will continue the marriage strike and the population will be wiped out. You will risk assassination at the hands of very angry divorced fathers and crazy feminists who cannot get a man, as they become conscious that you are the source of their problems. The masculists, who are more political than the MGTOWs, will accuse you in the broadcast media of being genocidal criminals and advise men to block vote against you in the elections. Men are half the population. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name: GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. Ciao.